Good morning. Good morning, class of 2017. This is the third year we're running the College Forum. What we're going to do is we brought in a couple college representatives. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what they look for in an incoming freshman at their college. They're going to talk to you about what's important now for your education. And at the end, we're going to open up for questions from you guys. But this is a very unique opportunity, and this is one of those chances for you guys to really take everything in, try to pay attention as best you can, because it's super important for you guys. 3 years from now, you guys will already have applied to colleges, and those 3 years are going to fly by. So what I want to do is open it up today. I have representatives from Central Michigan University and the University of Michigan, and they are going to hopefully enlighten you guys on the importance of grades, especially since we already came out with our first semester grades this year, and going forward, what you guys need to know from here on. I'm going to introduce Michael Guy from Central Michigan University.
Good morning. Thanks, Mr. Howell. Let me start with a question. How many of you have ever been to a college campus before? Not necessarily my campus, but a campus. Terrific. Almost 3/4 of the group. How many of you right now have a brother or a sister in college, on a college campus? Been up to visit? Take a look? Great. Today we're going to focus more on college in general, what we're looking for as colleges and universities, as opposed to Central Michigan University or University of Michigan. We feel like the most important thing right now isn't that you attend one of our institutions, but the fact that you end up going eventually. And that preparation is really going to be generic for all of our institutions. We're looking at more similar things than we are different things. And you know, if we look at the average profile between Central Michigan University, the incoming freshman that's coming in, what their grade point and test scores look like compared to the University of Michigan, they're very different. But we're still looking at a lot of the same things. We're expecting you to take the same sorts of classes, and a lot of the preparation is very similar. You just finished your first semester. How many of you right now can look back and honestly say, every single week I put in as much effort as I could? I know I could in my freshman year. And many times, we're all going to have good weeks and bad weeks, but as Mr. Howell mentioned a few moments ago, this time will go by pretty quickly. And if this semester you look back and you say, this wasn't my best work, and at the end of the year, if you look back and say, I could have done a little bit better, and turn the clock up and you're at the end of the junior year, and you're saying, I've watched 5 or 6 semesters go where I haven't really done my best work, then you've got some issues, some opportunities that have kind of passed you by. I'll give you an example that I see every year, and I think just about every admissions person in the state can give you a similar story. I've seen at least 7 or 8 letters that are like this. A student that will apply for admission, and they'll attach some additional information and basically tell me, or not me personally, but they're sending it to our admissions office for additional consideration, and the letter goes something like this. I didn't realize until the end of my junior year, or sometimes the beginning of my senior year, that I hadn't done, how important it was to do well throughout high school. Now it's a little too late, and I'm begging you for some additional consideration. I know I can do better. I know I'll be a very good college student if you just give me a chance. I know my grades are well below what you were hoping to see, because they've looked at the profile, they know what the average freshman looks like, and they're saying, however, I know I can perform at that level. When I was new, and I've done this for a number of years, I would see that and I would say, wow, well, maybe they could do a little bit better. And some of my colleagues that have been around for a while would say, Mike, past performance is a best predictor of future success. And that's what we'll look at. In many cases, there can be some very unusual circumstances where maybe a person had a family tragedy and a semester wasn't very good. But for 3 years, it's very difficult for us to explain that away and say, you haven't done your best work for 3 years, but we're sure that all of a sudden you're going to land on our college campus and do very well. So your past performance is the best predictor of your future success, and that's what we'll look at. And we'll talk about, I'll talk about my institution, but in general, what different universities are looking for. There are 15 public universities in the state of Michigan. Central Michigan, University of Michigan are two. You've heard many of the other usual suspects. Michigan State University in Lansing, Western Michigan in Kalamazoo, Grand Valley State in Allendale, Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Ypsilanti, Saginaw Valley. I can go on. And there are also a couple dozen more private institutions around the state. There are different sizes, different specialties, a lot of different things that we will kind of focus on as institutions. No one university set can say we offer everything to everyone. For instance, if one of you were to walk up to me and say, I want architecture, I know I want to be an architect when I go to college, I can tell you pretty quickly that we don't have the program, but University of Michigan has a fine program. On the flip side, there can be a student that could walk up and say, I know I want to go into aeronautics. I want to be a pilot. I want to go to flight school. There are certain universities, for instance, Western Michigan University has that program. Many other universities don't have. So many of us have specialty areas, but even though we have specialties, we're still looking at a lot of the same things. So for instance, I'll use our profile. And when I say profile, I mean what your grades, your test scores, and the things that you've done in high school look like. Our average freshman this fall is coming in with about a 3.3 grade point average and about a 23 composite score on the ACT. Now, I know the ACT doesn't mean a lot to some of you right now. If you've had older brothers or sisters that have gone to college, you remember when they took that, usually the spring of their junior year. In fact, the students that are 2 years older than you in about a month, I believe in March, they'll be taking that test as a junior. But that test, a perfect score in the ACT is 36. National average, I believe, is around a 19 or a 20. Our average freshman is about a 23. Michigan's going to tell you in a few moments that theirs is considerably higher. There are universities in our state that are quite a bit lower. If you look at the 15 state public universities, we're kind of, I won't say in the middle, probably a little bit higher than the middle as far as we look at our average test scores. But sometimes you'll hear those scores and that grade point, and you'll say, wow. With test scores, you're not really sure exactly how that works. But with grade point, you have your first semester grades, and you know where you're at right now. For some of you, you look at it and go, okay, 3.3, I'm there. Some of you look at that and say, I'm not there. Now, let me go a step beyond that and say, if you remember from math class, and I'm going way back with myself, the mean, the median, and the mode, if I remember right, the three different types of averages. To arrive at that average, there's a sample size or a group of students that are higher and a group of students that are lower. And that's not necessarily a minimum when we look at that 3.3, but I just wanted to give you kind of some framework or kind of some basic numbers to look at. There are students on our campus right now, the class of 2013, that had grade points lower than 3.3 that were admitted. And to arrive at that average, there were students at a higher sample size and a lower sample size. However, in general, I'll tell students that you should have a solid B average in high school to be a strong candidate for admission. Not just for my university, because if I look at Western, Grand Valley, Eastern, Saginaw Valley, a lot of these schools that are kind of middle-sized, some might be slightly lower than we are, there might be some that are slightly higher, but we're all kind of in that range where the average grade point is around, say, 3.0 to maybe 3.5, and there are some that are higher in the state. But in general, you should plan to have a solid B to B minus average to be a solid candidate to be admitted to kind of the middle-sized universities in the state of Michigan. More importantly, we're going to look at your course selection in high school as well. And you've heard your counselors encourage you to take a solid class schedule. Most of us, when we look at your classes, and even high schools, much like colleges are different, we see so many different transcripts now. Some are still on traditional semesters, some are on terms, but bottom line is we're hoping for the majority of your classes to be core academic or college prep classes while you're in high school. So for instance, if you're on semesters and you have 5 classes for the semester, we're hoping to see a solid math class, perhaps an English class. How many are in foreign language right now? Terrific. Most of us now are saying we'd like to see 2 years, not just 2 years of any language, but 2 years in the same language. So 1 year of French and 1 year of Spanish isn't viewed as desirable as you focusing your energies in one area. So 2 years of French, 2 years of Spanish, whatever the case may be, but a couple of years of language. Also taking, during the course of that schedule, perhaps a science class, and then maybe a humanities class. When all is said and done, we're hoping that that your schedule is dominated by college prep classes. And by the time we look at your 4 years, that you've had 4 years of math, 4 years of science, at least 2 years of foreign language, the 4 years of English, and then the social sciences, those core academic classes. On top of that, we'd like to see you challenge yourself at another level. So if you're taking an honors class, an AP class, those are all things that we're going to look at as we go through the process and look at your application as seniors. As Mr. Hall mentioned a few moments ago, it goes pretty quickly, and when you think about it, although the senior year is still important, we're making decisions based on your first 3 years of high school. Now, in some cases, we might wait to see a little bit of additional work, but really, you have finished with your first semester. You're well on your way in terms of looking at 6 semesters. You're through the first semester of those 6 semesters, and before you know it, you'll be a third of the way through the majority of the coursework that we're looking at in high school. So AP classes, honors classes, other things that have shown us that you're willing to go the extra mile to kind of extend yourself, because you're going to be looking at, as I mentioned the averages a few moments ago, in high school, you're in a good high school, and sitting among you, you have some very good students, but by the time you get to college, everyone is coming in with good grades. We're admitting students, and so that in your freshman year, if you're in an auditorium this size with a group of students, everyone sitting to your left and to your right, they were all coming in with good grades. And so we're looking for students that have competed at that level in high school. Other things we like to see. We like to see well-rounded students, and we're convinced, and we both represent campuses where, for the most part, our students are coming to Mount Pleasant in Ann Arbor, and they're moving there and they're living there. And Allison will tell you a little bit more specifically about her campus, but my campus, for instance, less than 2% of our students will commute. And by commute, I mean drive back and forth from classes, compared to, let's say, Wayne State, another one of the four-year public universities in our state that's very close by. A large number of Wayne State students will drive to Wayne State this morning, and they'll drive home this afternoon. They still have some students that are staying on campus, but they have quite a few students that will commute back and forth. One of the differences, and it's not any better or any worse, it's just that it's different. In our case, Mount Pleasant's a little farther away, and less than 2% of our students commute. So this morning, most of our students are in one of the 22 residence halls on campus. They're in an apartment that's close by. They're coming to class, they're taking classes, and at the end of the day, most of them are right there in the area on campus. And what that means to us is typically we need to make sure that we're providing lots of things to do outside the classroom. And for that reason, we found that the students that make the smooth transition from high school to college, that are able to graduate from high school, come to our campus and be successful, we found that the students that have been pretty active with extracurricular activities tend to make a pretty smooth transition, and they found that balance, because there's always a balance to be found in that you can't get too involved with your extracurricular activities and make your grade and allow your grade point to suffer. But at the same time, we realize that students that have had a fair amount of involvement in high school, be that with organizations here in your school, be that National Honor Society, or a language club, or athletics, or leadership activities here in your school, and volunteer activities in your community, we found that those students tend to make a good transition, a pretty smooth transition from high school to college. So those are things that we'll also take a very close look at. Though they aren't viewed as importantly as the grades that we just talked about, we still like to see a student that's been well-rounded. And in some cases, if it's a close call for us, and we're looking at the grades and we say, the grade point's good, maybe not quite where we'd like to see it, but the student's been very active in high school, and they've taken on some leadership activities, and they've really developed themselves that way, those are students that are going to be looked at very seriously for us. So we like to see that balance. Again, the grades are going to be the most important thing, but we like to see a student that's had some other things going on outside the classroom. So we'll look at your courses each year, or each semester, and for most of us, we're going to take a look at actually separating out those core academic classes. So you're required to take some electives, and you have a PE elective, and you have other classes that are not seen as academic classes, but we'll actually take your grades. We'll look at your grade points. So you all have, at this point, just finished your first semester, you have a cumulative grade point average, but many of us are actually going to take it a step further and say, we're going to isolate on those core academic classes and look at just your math, your English, your foreign language, those core academic classes. And sometimes, for some of us, we'll actually recalculate a separate grade point. In addition to that, that AP class that you took or the honors class that you took, and again, each university is a little bit different, but many of us will give you some additional points in the process for having that more rigorous coursework. So those are the types of things that we're looking at in the classroom as we go through your application. One of my least favorite questions, and Alice and I both talk to a lot of students in the fall. This time of year, not quite as many, but in the fall from, say, September until Thanksgiving, we're very busy. We work a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, speaking with students and speaking with families. And I'll get a number of students, and parents sometimes, but more students, and it's my least favorite question. They will walk up to me and they'll say, Mike, what's the absolute lowest grade point in test scores I need to get into your institution? Hate that question. And what that's, to me, it's really, you're selling yourself short. You're not putting yourself in the best position to succeed. And the questions I like to hear more often is, what kind of grade point do I need to get a scholarship? Because when we start to look at costs, and we won't talk that much about costs, because right now, whatever the cost is today for either of our institutions, unfortunately, it will be more by the time you go to college. So talking about specific numbers doesn't mean as much, but to talk more about scholarship opportunities, it's still going to be meaningful. No matter what institution you go to, there are some scholarship opportunities available, but typically you need to excel academically to get there. And again, different universities will have different thresholds in terms of the types of scholarships that you can receive. I can speak from the middle-sized universities and the ones that are kind of like Central in size, Central, Grand Valley, Western, Eastern. Each of us have different scholarships that are there for students who have excelled academically. I'll give you some examples of our scholarships. Our biggest scholarship on our campus is called Centralis, which I didn't have Latin, but my understanding is Centralis is just Central in Latin. And the Centralis Scholarship Competition takes place every fall for seniors in high school. So the class of 2014, those students came to our campus last November. Some universities will have them in the spring. I once worked at Michigan State University, and they have a scholarship competition called the Alumni Distinguished Scholarship, and that's actually usually taking place right about this time of the year. So it just depends on the university, but many scholarships are available through universities. Our Centralis Scholarship Competition, we will award full-ride academic scholarships every year to about 20 students, and another about 80 scholarships that are there that are full tuition scholarships. So there's a full ride scholarship, which includes all of your tuition, which is the classes that you're taking, but also your room and board. So the room that you're staying in, your meals, all those kinds of things for the course of the year. So often, the only full ride scholarships that you hear about are athletic scholarships, that someone got a full ride scholarship to play football or basketball on a college campus. But there are full academic scholarships for students who have excelled in the classroom, and we do award those every year. Typically, the students that receive those scholarships, to even get consideration, they have to have at least a 3.75 GPA, so they have to do very well. However, you don't necessarily have to be a 3.75 student to receive a scholarship to go to Central Michigan University, and I can speak also for other universities. If you have a solid 3.5 grade point average on our campus, typically you have some pretty good opportunities to receive some scholarship dollars. Also, if you have special talents in other areas, there are different departments that will often offer scholarships. I coordinate a journalism scholarship on our campus. Central has a very strong journalism program. Very strong in the broadcasting area. We're last year, for the 12th consecutive year, our television station, we actually have our own news program at night. was named Michigan College TV Station of the Year for the 12th consecutive year. So we have a long-standing tradition in that area. And it's one of those areas where we actually offer a scholarship for a journalism or broadcasting student. So those are things that are worth looking into, because if you have a specific area of interest, oftentimes a college campus that has or a university that has a specialty or a major that they offer, they may have scholarships for those particular areas. So be aware of those kinds of things. But back to my premise that my least favorite question is, what's the lowest possible grade point I can have to get into your institution? I'd much rather hear, at this point, from ninth graders, what kind of grades will I need to get a scholarship to go to your institution? And there are scholarships that are out there. And for many students, being able to get some scholarship dollars can be the difference between being able to afford to go to college and perhaps not being able to afford to go to college. So begin to think of your grades in some ways of kind of correlating or attaching it to actually money in a lot of ways. If you're doing well academically, if you're getting very good grades in college, it could help make you afford or make college more affordable. So those are just a few points. I want to make sure I leave Allison with a few moments to kind of talk a bit more about her institution and more about a larger institution, some of the different opportunities. A couple things just before I wrap up. When I talk about middle-sized or medium-sized universities, our enrollment on campus, the number of students on our campus is just over 20,000 students. There's some universities that are a little bit bigger, that are kind of in that size range. So Western, I believe, is about our same size. Grand Valley is slightly larger, around 21 or 22. Eastern's kind of right in that same range. The bigger universities, Wayne State, University of Michigan, Michigan State, are all quite a bit larger, and Allison will be able to tell you a bit more about her institution. Also, some of the smaller universities, there are universities. Central is located about 2.5 hours away. For those of you that aren't familiar, we're about 2.5 hours from Fraser. We are about an hour north of Lansing, where Michigan State is over 45,000 students. Between us, there's a private college called Alma College, which is about 1,500 students. So you have a university that's 45,000, about 40 miles to the north. Alma College is about 1,500, and Central Michigan University is 20,000. So you have kind of a range in sizes. Is bigger better? Is smaller better? Many times it's more about you finding a size that fits for you. I'll use a personal example. Two of my best friends in high school had a friend that went to Alma College, and another friend that went to, and several friends actually, that went to Michigan State University, and I went to Central. And I felt like I made a great decision for myself. My friend that went, or friends that went to State, a large university was perfect for them. And my friend that went to Alma College, which is only 15 miles from me, and I spent quite a bit of time, it's still one of my best friends. He is a partner for a large accounting firm, Ernst & Young, in Washington, D.C., and he's done very well for himself. And $1,500 for him for his undergraduate or completing his bachelor's degree was a perfect size. So many times it's about you finding a good size as well. For some of you, a bigger university will be perfect. For some of you, a very small college might be the right fit, and some of you, the in-between schools that are kind of middle-sized, like a CMU, might be the best fit also. But it's about you spending time during your freshman, sophomore, and junior year to learn more about some of those options. I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and she'll cover a little bit more about perspective for University of Michigan and the larger universities as well.
Good morning. That's a very bright spotlight on me right now. I feel a little intimidated talking to all of you. I want to just echo what Mike said. Everything he says really does apply to all institutions across the board. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about things that might be a little more specific to large public institutions and the University of Michigan. So how many of you guys have been to the University of Michigan's campus? Anyone been to the big house? How many of you guys have been in the medical center? I feel like that's what I always read essays about. Yeah, we have a handful here. They've only been to Michigan because they've been to the hospitals. But you guys have been on campus, and it's really large, it's really pretty. How many of you guys have siblings that are there? Anyone? And friends, family members, things like that? All right, cool. So it is very different being on a large campus versus a smaller, medium-sized. It is a little bit more like a fish in the ocean. But that was something that I loved about going to a large institution. I was really able to sort of make it my own. There's all these opportunities that were available to me. For example, at the University of Michigan, we have the most random clubs. Like, we have the Squirrel Club. And it's just for students that really like squirrels. So if you ever go on campus, you can notice them, they're really fat. That's just sort of what we're about. You have student organizations that do research, that are trying to break world records, and you just have all of these opportunities available to you. Every institution has opportunities available to them in different clubs and activities that are really unique to them. And so those are things that you're gonna wanna kind of look out for. So I really wanna focus sort of on the 6 things that we look at for application review, because that's what I'm most familiar with. But again, all of these 6 things really are transferable to any institution that you're applying for. All right, so the first thing, as Mike had mentioned, was your grade point average. And I realize right now you're thinking, you know, college is so far away, but you know, preparing for college is really like, you know, preparing for maybe like a long trip or a move. You really wanna start early rather than waiting to the last minute. So I want to talk about the grade point average because we do have, a higher, you know, as Mike said, our profile is a little bit different. So our grade point average for our average freshman is a 3.85. And I see some looks of panic on your face. Again, that's just an average. We don't have a minimum either. So we do have students that come in, you know, with lower grade point averages, and we have students that have that 4.0 that got all A's in high school. That being said, that's why it's really important to start focusing now while you're a freshman. It's really easy, even if you know you had a rough start right now, we take that into consideration. Sometimes that transition to your freshman to high school is really difficult. And we also consider the fact that, you know, let me rephrase that. Also, while you're only a freshman, it's a lot easier, even if you had that rough start, to raise your GPA still. If you wait until your junior year, it gets a lot tougher because really, you know, it's the average of all your classes. So while you've only taken a few, it's easy to kind of adjust your GPA still versus, you know, if you're reaching start of your junior year, you only have another semester or 2 of courses to be able to raise that GPA, you know, to balance out the other 4 that you had, all right? So that's why it's so important to start now. Even if you had a rough first semester, it's okay, there's still time to improve your GPA, and that's something that we do look at. We look at something called grade trend. So we're hoping that ideally your junior year is your best year of grades. And that doesn't mean that your freshman and your sophomore year don't matter. Again, that everything's calculated into the GPA. But it does mean that, you know, if you do have kind of a rough start, it's okay. That's not the end of the line to get into a great institution. All right, you know, I feel like let's make this a little more interactive. What else do you guys think we look for as we're looking at, as we're reviewing applications? Or participation, very quietly, very timidly, but yes. So your extracurricular activities. So we always say one of the things we say is that we're trying to enroll the leaders and the best. So we are looking for leaders, and that's something that every institution is looking for. You know, as Mike said, we are also a campus where the majority of students live on or near campus. So 98% of freshmen will live on campus in our community, which means we have a lot of extracurricular activities around, and we are hoping to enroll people that will be leaders. So while you're in high school, start getting involved now. It not only kind of gives you an idea of things that you might be interested in, but it also looks great on your college applications. We're looking for things more like depth versus breadth. So we want you to start being involved your freshman year. You know, take on activities that you're going to do from your freshman through your senior year, rather than choosing a new activity every single year that you don't really get rooted in, and you know that you don't ever experience any leadership opportunities. What else might we look for? All right, so pulling from things that Mike had said, we talked about the ACT, right? So again, our profile is a little bit different. Our middle 50th percentile is a 29 to 33, all right? And as he said, the maximum score is a 36. So I realize, again, that's high, but that's just the middle. So we accept students, I've been able to, this year alone, be able to admit students that, you know, have a 24 or 25, 26 ACT. All right, so again, I don't want you to think when you're seeing these numbers that that's sort of the end of the road. We want you to be doing the best that you can, right? Taking advantage of the opportunities that you have available for you. We're also looking at rigor of curriculum, which Mike had mentioned. So we're talking about AP and accelerated courses. So I know here at Fraser High School this year you had 7 APs available to you for the graduating senior class. We're not expecting you to take all 7 APs. That's, you know, taking all of them it's a heavy load. But try to maybe take, a couple your junior year, a few your senior year, things like that, and take them in the areas that you're interested in. So, for example, I was never somebody that liked history in high school. I'm sorry to any of the history teachers that are in here. It was just not a subject that jived with me. But that being said, then my expectation wasn't that I wasn't about to be a history major, so maybe AP history wasn't the best class for me to take. Rather, I was somebody that really enjoyed English and math, and so those were AP courses that I focused on in high school. So for example, if you are interested in becoming an engineer, you want to take those math and science courses, the hardest ones that you can that are available to you here, right? That kind of makes sense. If you're nursing, that would be the sciences. We are also looking to see, again, 2 years of the same foreign language, and as you're scheduling your courses, be really intentional about making sure you have enough core academic courses, like Mike was talking about. We look for 4 to 5 every single year. That does include your senior year, so don't start slacking off then. But total, ideally, we would like to see 18 to 20. So again, core academic courses are your math, science, English, foreign language, and social studies. All right, so that's really easy for you guys to kind of take control of on your own as you're scheduling, making sure you have 4 to 5 every single year. All right. Next, we would look at recommendation letters. So from the teachers you have in the room right here, all throughout high school. And I really personally recommend for students to actually get to know their teachers well. Go in for extra help, let them know more about you, learn about them. Honestly, teachers in my experience have been some of the most interesting people that I have met in my lifetime. They have a lot to teach you, not just within their subject, but also if they get to know you better, they can let you know about different opportunities that might be of interest of you. And also, quite frankly, recommendation letters are one of the best ways for me to kind of get a really great feel of the student. And if your teacher knows you better, they write a much more personal letter, right? So it'd be like, let's go with the Olympics right now. So let's say there's a sport that you love in the Winter Olympics. So for me, I always have really enjoyed watching figure skating. It's something that I grew up loving. And so it's a lot easier for me to talk about an athlete within a sport that I've been following and really be passionate and excited about that athlete versus say, like snowboarding. I love watching snowboarding during the Olympics, but I have no idea really what goes on in that sport beyond the every 4 years that I see it. So yeah, I can talk about it, but I'm not gonna be able to talk about it with the same enthusiasm that I do about figure skating. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? So if a teacher knows you really well, they've gotten to know you through the last few years, they really, their voice comes through of how much they're rooting for you. Obviously every teacher is rooting for you, but they can make it much more personal if you've gotten the chance to know them outside of the classroom. All right? And the last bit really is just the essays. But we don't really need to worry about the essays right now because, you won't be writing those until your senior year when you're applying. So those are just the 6 things, all right? So does that seem fairly, it's not scary, it seems fairly reasonable. So right now your action steps are just to really keep up your grades. And again, if you haven't been doing well, then start working on it to do your best. Try to improve. Every semester, try to do a little bit better than the semester before, and that will be helpful for any college. Any college is looking at grade trend, looking to hopefully that you're doing better and better as your courses get harder. And then step 2, work on your schedule. So make sure that you're very intentional about your scheduling, that you have enough academic courses every year, and that you're taking the hardest courses available to you in the areas that you're interested in. And then step 3 is to get involved right now, all right? Get involved with the extracurriculars, take on leadership opportunities when you have a chance. And just so you know, extracurriculars aren't just sports and clubs available here. If you have a part-time job, maybe you babysit or you work as a cashier at a grocery store, perhaps you are you have some family responsibilities. And I'm not saying doing the dishes. I see that sometimes as an extracurricular for us, and they say, we spent 2 hours a week doing the dishes for the last 4 years. That's normal kid stuff, right? But perhaps, you are the person that has to babysit your younger sibling every day after school until your parents get home after dinner. Let us know, because that means you maybe weren't able to participate in, in other extracurricular activities. All right? So start getting involved, take on leadership when you can. Religious organizations, I think that's often one that students have too. Those count as well. So it's not just things that are related to school. And then lastly, get to know your teachers. Start getting, going in for extra help if you need help with your grades. Start, just asking them questions maybe about how they became a teacher, why they became interested in the subject that you're studying. All right, so those are pretty easy action steps, right? I feel like everybody can do those. Yes, just nod along with me. Humor me a little bit. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so coming onto a large campus can be very overwhelming. I know that I was particularly overwhelmed when I started at a large institution. And there's just a lot of students around all the time, right? And it feels a little bit scary. I know for the University of Michigan, we have 28,000 undergraduates. We have even more once you include graduate students, somewhere in 42,000 range. So it's really quite intimidating being on campus and seeing everyone. But what's really cool is that you can really make that campus feel small by getting involved. So again, as I said, getting involved is really important in high school because we want to see what you're going to bring to our campus. And then ultimately, that helps you transition the best because you are already used to, as Mike said, that balance between your extracurriculars and your grades, all right? Trying to think of what other, okay, and then let's go on to paying for college a little bit. I'm sorry, my presentation is a little shorter because Mike covered everything so well and much better than I would, I might add. So paying for college, the sticker price on large institutions does often seem, especially your large publics, does seem to be a little bit pricier. So I'm gonna be honest with you, Michigan is going to be one of the most expensive colleges in the state of Michigan, if not the most expensive, based on the sticker price. But that's something I want you guys to keep in mind for all colleges. The sticker price often isn't what you're paying, all right? So, for example, Mike talked about scholarships. So we have scholarships available as well. Every student that's admitted to the University of Michigan is automatically qualified for a merit scholarship. And because all of our students are top students, we do look at everything. So it is, not just your grades or your ACT score, but it's also gonna be things like the leadership and the extracurricular activities and the recommendation letters. What's more important though is that we also have financial aid. So again, not the sticker price available, but there is aid available where essentially you just fill out a couple forms at that time when you're applying, and then we will pay, for example, with the University of Michigan, we get to do something great called meeting full demonstrated need, which means that these forms, the government will calculate how much your family can afford to pay, and we will pay everything else up to that point. And though this might include, some loans, a lot of times it's primarily grants, all right? Which means you don't have to pay anything back. So, and I know every institution has financial aid like that available, where it is, a mix of grants and loans. So essentially, that sticker price all of a sudden is narrowed down significantly. So for example, I know for us, if your family makes a total income of $60,000 or less, your entire tuition will be paid for. All right, so we cover, and that's all in grants, so you don't have to pay anything back afterwards. All right, and then from there on out, you might have a few grants added in, or a few loans added in, but it won't be a very significant amount. So always keep that in mind. Don't ever let price be the reason that stops you from going to a four-year institution, because there are ways that we can help work with you to help figure out how to afford it, all right? And I think with that, that's about all I have. And I'm gonna pass the mic to Mr. Howell.
We want to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions as well. So I have Mr. Ray and Mr. Demetral walking around with microphones. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll have Mr. Guy, Ms. Wang, answer any questions that you guys have specific to maybe something that they didn't cover. You guys want to say that?
Do I have to?
Okay.
If you meet, if you have your ACT score correct, but not your grade point average, or your grade point average, not your ACT score, could you still get accepted into the colleges?
I'll start and have Allison kind of finish. There is sort of a sliding scale, if you will, in our process, where if you have, we both mentioned that 36 is a high with the ACT, and let's say your grade point is a little bit lower and the ACT is a bit higher, one area kind of offset the other to a certain degree. And I'm speaking in generalities because it's really difficult. Our processes are different, and there are 15 public universities and then a couple dozen private. So everyone weighs it to a certain degree differently, but there is some some room for movement with each of those areas. Now, there's some extremes that just won't work. I saw a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure Allison can tell you similar stories. I saw a student with a 2.1 and a 29 or a 30 in the ACT. That student had the potential to, you don't guess your way to a 30 in the ACT. The student had tremendous potential but didn't tap that potential. That wasn't a student that we admitted in our process. The grade point was too low. But however, if the grade point perhaps is up, I mentioned 3.3 is the average, maybe in our process if a student is in that 2.7 range, 2.6 range with a very high ACT, one area can offset the other area to a certain degree. And then the reverse is true sometimes too. With a very high grade point and maybe a student doesn't test well, sometimes one area can help balance the other. But I'll let Allison offer her insight as well.
Yeah, for us it's kind of similar. We do a little bit less of the sliding scale. It's a much more holistic review at the University of Michigan. So holistic really just means that we're considering every single factor that we can on your application. But he is right that it can offset a little bit. I would personally, when I'm reviewing applications, much rather see a high GPA where you're doing well in difficult classes and a low ACT than the other way around, where you have, again, the high ACT and a low GPA. Because again, as Mike said, that makes me have some question marks about whether you were really working to meet your potential or not, right? So, the ACT is not built to be the super simple test that you just fly through. So I'm hoping, if I'm seeing a 30 on the ACT, with a 3.0, which I have seen, I'm having some question marks as to why it is that you didn't get better grades in high school. All right, does that kind of help answer your question? But it's not a set in mark stone where you need this ACT and this GPA to be able to get in, I think, to either school.
Oh, this is really loud. I had heard that, and I don't know if it's true, that if you're an athlete aspiring to play in college, then online classes aren't credited for you guys. Like, if you take an online, then it's like through the NCAA that it's not like a credited class.
Okay, so we're both standing looking at each other like, do you know the answer to this question? So quite frankly, I don't know 100% the answer to that question, all right? So that's something you need to check with the NCAA. But with that in mind, I know for the University of Michigan, we prefer not to see online courses in general because the reality is we don't offer a lot of online courses on our campus. It's like less than 2% of our courses available can be taken online. So that being said, you still need to go through a regular admissions process, even if you're an aspiring athlete. So that's something that we would prefer not to see. If you do have a couple because you're really just trying to meet some requirements, that's fine, but we don't want to see a whole ton of them.
Sure. Yeah, and we apologize for not knowing the answer to that specific question, although I echo Allison's comments in that we would prefer to see the traditional coursework. Mr. Howell just mentioned this is probably a good time to talk about clearinghouse requirements. Both schools are Division I athletically. Big Ten is a much bigger conference, but Central, I guess for those of you that are college basketball fans, Central's part of the Mid-American Conference, and you often, seems like in a tournament every year, it's not us, unfortunately, but there's some school that kind of takes the world by storm in a tournament. They call them mid-majors. The MAC conference is a mid-major conference, so it's still D1, but smaller than the Big Ten or the SEC. No matter what, if you're looking at athletics, really at whatever collegiate level, but definitely at D1, there are clearinghouse requirements that you need to be aware of. And the clearinghouse is really just kind of the NCAA's way of saying, we want to make sure that you've taken care of the coursework necessary to be prepared. At the end, once you've reached clearinghouse requirements, you should be working with your counselors while you're in high school to make sure that you're all set. It's really just a matter of taking the classes that they recommended you to take during your 4 years in high school, and then at the end you're given clearinghouse requirement, or you're given the stamp of approval from the NCAA clearinghouse. So it's really just something, if you're taking the classes that they're recommending that you take, you will have met clearinghouse requirements, but it's always good to be working with your counselors and even with your coaches to make sure those are taken care of. Anything else about clearinghouse?
I think a lot of that is stuff, again, you want to check on the academic standards on your way as you're preparing for clearinghouse, but that's also something keep in touch with their counselor, letting them know that this is something that you're interested in, because there are steps I know later on in the process that you don't take until your junior or senior year when you're applying. So just kind of keep that in mind and in your back pocket right now.
Yeah. Quick comment. We had a student a few years ago on our campus that had met every requirement, had done just fine academically in high school, but they didn't take care of the clearinghouse requirements, and they weren't eligible to compete their freshman year in college because of it. Didn't have anything to do with the grade point deficiency or not meeting test score requirements. They just didn't follow through with the paperwork for clearinghouse. So it's just good to be aware of those things.
Any other questions?
If you're special ed, is there different ways that you can get into school and like be helped in high school? I mean, not high school, in college.
If you, let's say for instance, have a learning disability, and I'll speak for us and let Allison expand on it, we're still going to look to have you, we're going to view your application just like any other. You still need to meet the regular admission requirements. If a student does meet those requirements, let's say a student that has an IEP in high school, we encourage students to meet with our disability services office on campus to make sure that you're able to get assistance if necessary, because that can carry through. And different universities will have different services available, but we all have some services. There are some universities, coming out of state, for instance, I know Wright State University in Dayton really specializes in working with students with learning disabilities. In our case, we have an office that can assist you, and there are certain services that are available. So in short, we will look at your application like any other. If you meet regular admission requirements, then if you need some additional assistance, we will help provide that assistance, but we usually will require that you have the IEP in order for us to take that and decide what services we're able to offer you. I don't know if that makes sense, and I'll let Allison expand on that too.
Yeah, so we do also have services available, and again, we do still need to kind of measure you up to our typical admissions requirements, because we don't want to admit students with special circumstances or just different things that they're dealing with if we don't think they can be successful. We don't want to admit anybody in, and kind of set them up for failure if we don't think that this is going to be the right fit for them. All right, so at the University of Michigan, again, we also have different services available, so things like, perhaps you're somebody that needs, because of, whatever learning disability you have, you might need some extra time on a test that you're taking. So you'll work with, different offices on campus, and you'll make sure that that happens for the exams that you take, that you get some extra time, things like that. We would like to accommodate every student as much as possible. It's also something we look for. We understand, if you've been able to overcome a learning disability, you're doing really well. We take that into consideration within our holistic review, and that's a way that I can kind of help to advocate for your application then. So if you have extenuating circumstances, for anything, whether it's, a health condition that you've had to deal with, learning disability, any of those things, we take that into consideration, understanding that, that's an extra barrier that you've had to overcome. And if you're still doing well with that, we definitely want to be able to try to accommodate in any way that we can.
I was wondering if either of your colleges had any military programs or possible benefits for like military-bound students who apply.
All right, so military programs. So I know, I'm not sure about Central, I'm guessing you do, but we have the ROTC available at the University of Michigan. It's not a program that I know a ton about, I don't know. So I'm gonna let Mike expand, but there are different branches, available at each college, and it's definitely available for us at the University of Michigan, and it's something that you may be able to get actually some scholarship money for as well.
I'm fairly familiar on our campus. We happen to offer Army ROTC, and you look around. I mentioned I once worked at Michigan State. I believe they have Air Force and Army. Michigan Tech, I know right offhand, has Air Force ROTC, and there are different branches around the state. And there are some terrific advantages. And within ROTC, and this isn't just us, this is just kind of the way the structure is set up with the federal government, with the Army, and with all branches of the services. There's one level that will require service after graduation, where you'll go through, and that's where the most money is involved, where you're getting really tens of thousands of dollars upon completion, or they will assist you with in college as well as beyond college. But your commitment after you've graduated is going to be to the service after you finish. But one of the advantages is that you're entering as an officer, so you kind of move in at a rank. There's another level that doesn't require a level of service or commitment after you finish. There's less money involved, but I guess the trade-off is that you're not required to go through the service after you've finished. So a couple of different areas. I don't want to speak for every university, but there are, in most cases, kind of two different levels for the service. Army is by far the most prominent in our state as far as the ROTC branches around college campuses around the state, but Air Force and I believe Navy on some campuses as well with ROTC.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and give a hand to our two representatives today.